This video is made possible by our sponsors, AJA. We'd like to thank AJA for all their support and tell you to go to aja.com for all your production and post-production needs. Hi, I'm Gordon Burkell from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify our existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com, or of course, follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u. Every week, we interview a film professional to discuss their work, and this week, I'm joined by director and editor Zach Kashkett, whose recent film, The Mad Writer, premiered at Slamdance. Welcome to the show, Zach.
Thank you so much for having me.
My first question is, how did this project, The Mad Writer, come about?
Yeah, so I've been friends with The Mad Writer's a film about a hip hop producer who lives in Nashville named Larange. And I've been friends with Larange since I was like 13 years old. And I kind of always just thought he was an interesting character and would make a unique subject for a documentary. I work in documentaries, so I feel like I can spot a unique subject when I see one, and he was definitely one. And so I bugged him for years about the idea of making a film about his life. He's sort of an up and comer, but he's really got a fan base and he's putting out some really interesting work. So I thought it would be, the best of both worlds, an interesting subject and an interesting topic, his music. And so we bugged him for years to make it. And almost as soon as he finally said yes, he started having these really major health concerns, which just sort of deepened and made the film more complex and interesting and kind of changed the trajectory of our whole story we were going to tell. So yeah.
Well, it's interesting because that was going to be my question was, at what stage did you know about the illness? So how did it change your filmmaking? If you started without the knowledge, how did it change the film?
Yeah, I mean, well, so obviously initially it was both that I knew the guy and knew he was just so interesting and kind of morose and misanthropic. That was sort of the initial take, was just he's such a unique personality to put on film. But we were going to try to do a more like comprehensive bio film that covered his career or the career thus far and where he wanted to go and his influences, and sort of a more conventional music bio. But what the illness ended up allowing us to do is really kind of focus it and make it instead like this story of this specific 3-year window of time, and like what he was going through and how he operated during that time. So yeah, it ended up making it like a lot more focused, I think, and less sprawling and freewheeling.
Well, and what's interesting is it reminded me, and I don't know if you've seen this film, but it's All Gone Pete Tong. Have you seen that?
No.
It's based on a true story about a DJ in the UK who is losing his hearing.
Oh, wow.
And like what he goes through with that. So when you started documenting this, because he seems very reluctant, like he doesn't want to be talked. So how do you find that like balance, or that where's the line for you in terms of like how much to push a person when they're sort of reluctant, but they're also participating?
Yeah, I mean, his reluctance ended up being like a really big part of the film in the end. It sort of was impossible to cut around by the end. We've known each other so long that by the first interview, it was clear he like was going to have a hard time taking this seriously in a way. And I've also been a film editor my whole life. This is the first time I've ever directed something. So he was definitely going to run me through my paces in terms of the ego involved and everything. Every time I asked him a question, there was a level of like, my old buddy, who are you to ask me this question? Who are you to be making this movie? So it took a while to kind of like bring him around to the idea that this was going to be a substantial piece of work he could be proud of. And I think at that point he started taking it a little more seriously, but we had already done a lot of the interview. And so we just kind of realized that it was interesting, and it was like, if we leaned into it, it would make the film feel a little unique. And like, as hard as at some points it felt like pulling teeth to get answers out of him or whatever, but some of the way that he ended up answering them with his hesitancy ended up being like really fascinating on film. And I think in the end, kind of our push and pull and our relationship interpersonally, our dynamic, ended up making it feel a little more interesting.
My friends and I would make little videos in our backyards, imitations of Indiana Jones and Star Wars. Eventually that need to tell stories became more of a technical interest and an interest in the art. To me, what's exciting is using cinema in its full potential, which is rhythm and sound design and music. Our job is to set up expectations and then deliver on them. I'm Brian Cates, and this is my course in film editing.
Well, did you cut it? Did you edit as you directed, or did you try to capture everything and then edit?
Yeah, I cut as I went, which was like, well, we shot for like a year, and then I started cutting everything together. And then once we sort of were able to see the shape of it, we had a better idea of what to go back out and how to focus the rest of the story we wanted to shoot. But I was cutting the whole time. And so, with the year or so we spent trying to convince him to do it, and then all the shooting, this whole project was about 8 years in total. And probably the last 4 were mainly just cutting. We would go back and shoot little pickups here and there, but it was really just editing.
Now, what's interesting, so like the ear issue gives you like that nice sort of storyline or the arc. What were some of the difficulties in the story that you had to sort of figure out in post?
There was a lot. I mean, like, personally, it was a difficult film for me to make because he's like one of my oldest friends, and I just felt all this pressure about like both letting him down, like making sure that he felt like this was worth all of this time and creative input, but also that it like represented him in a way and felt like worthy of if this was going to be like the one documentary about him, at least right now, that it felt like it represented him in a way. And so it was hard for me to like, I went through a lot of versions of the film. And I had this great producer, John Webb in Los Angeles, who's a music video director who I had cut for a lot. And he really helped me kind of look at things from a more directorial standpoint and just kind of focus in on the film that we really wanted to make. And in the end, it really was just letting go of all of these like pretenses of what we thought we were going to try to do or what he deserved or whatever. And even like in a way, if we were like being nice to him, if we were being with the final cut, trying to not care about how we made him look, how we just presented it as trying to present it as just authentic and honest in the end. Helped us frame it, helped us like figure out what it was supposed to be. It was very amorphous for a while. And yeah, in the end, it was kind of just like, this is what we shot. This is the best of what we shot. So let's lean into the best of what we shot.
How did doing this doc change your relationship with him?
With L'Orange?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot. I mean, it was a difficult journey. Like for a couple of years, we were shooting it and he was very, I mean, you see it in the film. He's like, comically apprehensive, but willing to go along with it for an old friend. And he didn't watch the film until it premiered at Slamdance. So that element of it was difficult because I would show him scenes here or there, but he really had no idea like what the shape of it was, what the feel of it was. And so there was a lot of pressure on both on me and our relationship. Like our friendship took a journey with this film because I think if you don't work in documentary, it's sometimes hard to like understand how long these things take. And it can get from the outside, it can feel like, God, this guy's just he keeps coming back and he wants to film more. And this thing is never going to be done. And what is this project? And why do I still have it in my life after 8 years? So I think it took some understanding from both sides to get to the final product.
Well, I would almost be like nervous to show it to him because having worked on docs, you're rearranging, like you're not Frankenbiting, but you're like rebuilding parts so that it flows nicer, or you might rearrange. So I'd be almost worried if with someone who's reluctant in a doc to be showing them that. And that's why I'm really interested is since he was reluctant, and you're changing things or making things. So Hugh showed it to him at Slamdance for the first time.
Yeah.
How did he take it?
Took it well. I was scared, man. I mean, like we walked up to the Q&A and, you know, one of the last like monologues in the film is about how he knows he's going to hate the movie. And then we're walking, the credits roll and we're walking up to the Q&A and he gets handed a mic and, you know what the first question is going to be. What did you think? And so it was a pressurized situation for me, certainly. But he really liked it and he took it well, and we got to do like a lot of press together afterwards, a bunch of radio stuff right afterwards, and it was really nice to hear kind of in real time his response to it, like unchecked and unguarded, because he didn't really have time to formulate a different opinion. It was just first, gut check reaction. And I think he really likes that, like the film focuses on some topics that are really important to him, like mental health and some of the hearing loss and the ways that he got over it, just overcoming adversity in general, and the ways that he has found to do that in his life. I think he's really proud that the film can be like potentially a blueprint for other people, or can provide some kind of an example.
Now, do you think he would do another doc afterwards, or is he like, no, I've learned my lesson?
Something. I don't foresee the Mad Writer 2 in his future, but who knows? I could see with someone else maybe. Like, I don't think we would make another doc together again. I think it was like a fun experiment. It was a very specific kind of film that, like, just as much as the story we were trying to tell, it was how we were trying to tell it was going to be on screen. And so I don't know that you could do that again the same way, but I think also he just learned his lesson about having cameras in his face for that much of his life. I think he'll be happy to wash his hands of the whole experience.
Now, did you learn something as a director that sort of changed your perspective of editing?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, it was a great experience in that sense. And like, that was a big reason that I made the film to begin with, is at the time I was editing commercials, and I really, really wanted to break into like long form documentary or narrative storytelling. And there just wasn't a lot of work coming my way for that. And so I had been working on a doc that kind of went belly up. I've been working on a doc for about a year, and then the two directors ended up fighting with each other and the project kind of died. And I was left with this feeling of like, well, if I had a cool topic and had a cool DP that I could send out and we could go out together, we could really do this on our own. I was like, it was all gumption, and I didn't know what I didn't know. But what I learned from the process was like immeasurable. I feel like by the end, I could cut this. I could make a better movie now. I'm sure everybody who makes a movie feels that way, but I could definitely cut a better movie now. And like, I learned so much about just synthesizing the idea from the start, not trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, and trying to be like realistic with what you have and not trying to force it into what you wished you had. I feel like I learned a lot about like story arc too. Like there was a lot of stuff that I wanted to fit into the film that just didn't in the end. It just didn't serve us. And like, if you're slowing down and boring the audience, it doesn't really matter what you're trying to convey. Like if it just doesn't functionally work in the timeline, then it doesn't work. And I feel like I learned a lot about like being real with yourself and what you shot as a filmmaker.
Now, similar to the question for L'Orange, would you make another doc now?
Yeah, someday I hope to. I mean, I have an idea that my collaborators and I on this have been talking about, and it's another kind of like personal story. I don't know that I'd be right to make a film just about a different subject. I feel like I was uniquely qualified to make a really personal story about my friend and me. And the next idea we have is a story about something, an event that happened to me and another friend in college. And so I think maybe another really personal tale, but I'm an editor by trade, and I really love it. It's like the one thing I've always wanted to do with my life since I was 13 years old. And again, made this almost, at least initially, as like a portfolio piece. It took 8 years to make, but by the end of it, I find myself working pretty steadily in this long form documentary realm, which I'm really blessed to be able to say. But that was the purpose of making it, was so that I could attract long form editorial work. So I might direct again, but I'm really excited about the doors that it's opened for me in editing.
Now, I have one last question for you. What would you say is your favorite guilty pleasure film or TV show to watch?
Guilty pleasure. Well, My favorite film is Being John Malkovich. I could watch it every single day. I don't know if I call it a guilty pleasure because it's such a beautiful, brilliant film. It's not really, I don't feel guilty about watching it every day. But my actual guilty pleasure is Law and Order. I could watch Law and Order all the time. And I love how comforting the construction is. Like every episode follows the exact same arc, and so you can tune in at any time and you're pretty sure this guy's not the murderer because you're meeting him 5 minutes in, so they wouldn't give you the murder 5 minutes in. Yeah, me and my wife love Law and Order. We watch it all the time.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for letting me interview today.
Sure, thanks so much. This is great.
And that's it for this week, everyone. Make sure to check us out at filmmakeru.com, or of course, follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u. I'm Gordon Raquel. Thanks for watching. This video is made possible by our sponsors, AJA. We'd like to thank AJA for all their support and tell you to go to AJA.com for all your production and post-production needs.